There comes a moment in every survivor's journey when something quietly but profoundly shifts. It is not loud, it is not dramatic. It is the moment when the narcissist realizes you are not coming back. Not this time, not ever, and while you may imagine that this realization brings instant remorse or accountability, the truth is far more revealing. What it actually triggers is exposure. Because when a narcissist knows they have permanently lost access to you, the mask begins to slip in ways they never intended for you to see. For a narcissist, relationships are not built on mutuality, connection, or growth. They are built on access, control, and emotional leverage. You were not valued for who you are, but for what you provided: validation, regulation, attention, and identity reinforcement. So when you leave and stay gone, it creates something they cannot tolerate: irrelevance. And irrelevance feels like annihilation to someone whose entire sense of self depends on external supply. This is why your final departure doesn't inspire healing in them. It activates their deepest insecurities. Behind the scenes, they scramble. They rewrite narratives, recruit sympathy, posture strength, and perform indifference. Not because they have moved on, but because they are desperately trying to restore a sense of dominance they can no longer reach through you. Their behaviors become more performative, more reactive, more revealing, because the one person who once absorbed the impact of their dysfunction is no longer there. And here is the most important truth: none of what they secretly do is about love, loss, or longing. It is about control and the terror of being exposed without a witness to manipulate. Your absence becomes the mirror they cannot escape. And in that silence, you are no longer participating in their story. You are finally writing your own. There is a distinct moment when the narcissist senses finality, and it is not when you argue back, plead, or try to be understood. It happens when your energy changes, when your emotional availability disappears, and when your presence no longer feels accessible to them. This is the moment control begins to dissolve, and panic quietly takes its place. You may not even announce that you are done, but they feel it because the dynamic that once fed them has stopped responding in familiar ways in your own life. This moment often arrives after prolonged exhaustion. You have explained yourself repeatedly, accommodated endlessly, and hoped that empathy would eventually be met with empathy. Instead, you learned that every explanation became ammunition, and every boundary was treated as a challenge. When you finally stop engaging, it is not indifference, it is clarity. You are no longer trying to convince them of your worth, because you have reclaimed it for yourself, for the narcissist. This shift is deeply destabilizing. Control has always been maintained through predictability, knowing how to provoke you, soothe you, guilt you, or pull you back in. When you disengage emotionally, they lose access to their primary regulatory system. This is when the panic begins. They may escalate behaviors, create urgency, rewrite history, or suddenly appear remorseful. None of this is about repair. It is about restoring control before it is permanently lost in your life. This is the turning point where fear begins to give way to self-trust. You start recognizing patterns instead of promises. You stop waiting for closure from someone incapable of providing it. The anxiety you once felt around their reactions slowly transforms into resolve. You understand that peace does not come from being understood by them, but from no longer needing their validation as control collapses on their side. Strength quietly builds on yours. Their panic is fueled by the realization that you are no longer accessible, manageable, or emotionally tethered. Your calm becomes the evidence that the dynamic has ended, and while they may attempt to reassert dominance in subtle or dramatic ways, the truth remains unchanged. You are no longer participating in the cycle, and that finality is the very thing they fear most. Your silence is often misunderstood as weakness, avoidance, or passivity, but in the context of narcissistic dynamics, it becomes one of the most powerful consequences you can deliver without intending to punish. In your life, silence emerges not as a tactic, but as a natural result of emotional exhaustion and self-preservation. You stop explaining, defending, and reacting because you finally recognize that engagement only kept the cycle alive for a narcissist. Attention is regulation. Your reactions once helped them stabilize their fragile sense of self, whether those reactions were loving, angry, or hurt. Silence removes that stabilizer. When you no longer respond, they are left alone with their own thoughts, insecurities, and narratives. This is profoundly unsettling for someone who relies on external validation to feel real and in control in your experience. Choosing silence marks a shift from survival to dignity. You no longer feel compelled to correct their version of events or prove your reality. You begin to trust that your truth does not require their acknowledgement. What once felt like abandonment of your voice becomes an act of self-respect. You learn that not every battle deserves your energy, and not every misunderstanding needs to be clarified. This is why your silence feels so loud to them. Without your reactions, they lose the ability to provoke, manipulate, or redirect the narrative through emotional engagement. They may test boundaries, send mixed messages, or attempt to elicit a response through guilt or urgency. Each unanswered attempt reinforces the same message. You are no longer available for this dynamic in your life. This creates space for healing. Your nervous system begins to settle. The hypervigilance fades as you stop anticipating their next move. You redirect your attention inward, rebuilding the parts of yourself that were neglected while you managed their emotional world. Silence becomes the boundary that requires no explanation and no enforcement. What makes your silence such a powerful consequence is that it is not designed to teach them a lesson. It simply reflects your decision to choose peace over chaos. And in doing so, you remove yourself from the role they assigned you, leaving them to confront the absence of control. They can no longer ignore manipulation only works when access exists. In your life, the shift from manipulation to powerlessness begins the moment you remove emotional, psychological, and physical access to yourself. This is not an impulsive act, but the culmination of clarity, boundary setting, and self-preservation. You stop being reachable in the ways that once allowed them to influence your emotions, decisions, and self-perception. For a narcissist, access is everything. It is how they extract validation, control narratives, and regulate their internal instability. When that access disappears permanently, manipulation loses its effectiveness. Guilt no longer lands, charm no longer disarms, and intimidation no longer unsettles. What once felt confusing becomes transparent. You recognize patterns instead of promises, and tactics instead of intentions in your own experience. Cutting access is both terrifying and liberating. There is grief in accepting that the relationship will never become what you hoped it could be. At the same time, there is relief in no longer living inside constant emotional negotiation. You are no longer bracing for the next mood shift or trying to anticipate how to keep the peace. Your energy returns to you. This loss of access creates a profound power shift. Without you to react, reassure, or absorb blame, they are left without their primary source of control. This can trigger attempts to re-enter your life through indirect means, third parties, sudden crises, or carefully crafted messages designed to provoke nostalgia or fear. These are not signs of growth. They are evidence of powerlessness emerging where manipulation once worked in your life. Permanence is the key. Temporary boundaries invite testing. Permanent absence ends the game. When you no longer make exceptions, explain your decisions, or engage in emotional exchanges, the dynamic collapses. You are no longer participating in the role assigned to you, and without your participation, the system cannot function. As access disappears, something quiet but transformative happens within you. Your sense of self strengthens. You stop defining yourself in reaction to someone else's behavior. Peace replaces hypervigilance. The powerlessness they experience mirrors the empowerment you reclaim. And while they may struggle to accept the loss of control, you are finally free from the manipulation that once kept you trapped. Your absence is not passive, and it is not accidental. In your life, it becomes the most profound consequence because it is the one outcome they never truly prepared for. Narcissistic dynamics are built on the assumption that you will stay, explain, forgive, and adapt. They rely on your empathy, your hope, and your willingness to give one more chance. What they rarely anticipate is your final departure with no intention of returning when you are gone. The structure that once protected them from accountability begins to collapse. You were the buffer between their behavior and its consequences. You absorbed the confusion, the self-doubt, and the emotional labor that allowed them to avoid self-reflection. Your absence removes that buffer. Without you, there is no one left to manage the fallout of their actions or soften the impact of reality in your experience. Leaving is not about punishment or revenge. It is about survival and self-respect. You reach a point where staying costs more than leaving, and your nervous system can no longer tolerate the chaos. Walking away requires courage because it means letting go of the fantasy that things could still change. But in doing so, you reclaim your agency and your sense of self for them. Your absence forces confrontation, not necessarily growth, but exposure. They must face relationships that do not accommodate their patterns, environments that do not bend to their needs, and mirrors that reflect back what they tried to avoid. This reckoning is quiet and internal, and it cannot be managed through charm or control. It exists because the person who once made everything easier is no longer there in your life. This absence creates space for restoration. You begin to heal parts of yourself that were neglected while you focused on maintaining the relationship. Your energy shifts from managing dysfunction to nurturing stability. You rediscover your values, your voice, and your capacity for peace. What makes your absence such a powerful reckoning is that it requires nothing from you. You do not need to explain, justify, or prove anything. Simply by choosing not to return, you allow the consequences to unfold naturally, and in that quiet resolve, you step fully into a life no longer shaped by someone else's need for control. The most important truth to carry forward is this: your healing does not require their understanding, apology, or acknowledgement. Closure is not something they can give you, because closure comes from the moment you stop seeking validation from the very person who destabilized you. When you chose silence, distance, and absence, you were not giving up. You were reclaiming yourself. What follows may feel unfamiliar at first. Peace can feel empty when chaos has been normalized. Stillness can feel unsettling when your nervous system has been trained to anticipate conflict. But this quiet is not loss, it is recovery. It is your system learning safety again. It is your identity reforming outside of survival mode. You are not responsible for how they experience your absence. Their reactions are not a measure of your worth, nor are they evidence that you were wrong to leave. They are simply the natural outcome of a dynamic that can no longer exist without your participation. You did not destroy the relationship. You outgrew a pattern that was costing you your well-being. As you move forward, let your life speak for itself. Let your boundaries be firm, your silence intentional, and your absence complete. You are no longer available for manipulation, confusion, or emotional extraction. What remains is clarity, self-trust, and a future shaped by choice rather than control. And in that space, you are not just surviving, you are becoming whole.